right, everyone. Welcome to our February meeting. Just a couple of reminders. If you are planning to go to conference, remember to register before March 29th for early bird pricing. And then just a reminder that you need to attend at least 6 meetings and have at least 6 volunteer hours to qualify for Dean's reimbursement. And then there's a new university policy. So if you are planning to go, you need to fill out this short survey before you leave. Our next meeting will be March 28th, same time, same place. And Megan Bruder, who's a pediatric therapist, will be talking about her journey and experience. And with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Bay. Which one do you want?
Yeah, that one's
this one.
Yeah, for now. Okay, and we'll see if this works. Oh, there it is. Oh, I wasn't supposed to plug in. Okay, so this is a presentation on transgender and gender nonconforming care. I know it was talked about LGBT issues in OT, but I kind of focus more on transgender issues because LGBT issues are typically not that different than the general population. There's some things that are different, but transgender issues are definitely more of an issue that we as OT see. So I got into this. Why are we talking about this? Let me tell you first how I got into this. Last year, I had a kid come to me who was going to be starting kindergarten, and he had already transitioned, and mom wanted to see how he was doing from a developmental standpoint. And so I evaluated him, and then when I was scoring the eval, I was like, do I use male standardized scores or female standardized scores? I wasn't sure. So I started doing some research into it, and there isn't a whole lot to help with that question. I even asked the experts at AOTA, and they didn't have an answer. But as I kind of was pondering all of this, I realized too that there's 4 OTs in our clinic, and all of us had somebody that was at some point along the journey of transitioning. So I decided to put this PowerPoint together for our group to kind of know, even our front desk people, what we do and how we interact with these people and help them with this process that they're going through. So anyway, that's kind of how this came about. Why do we need to talk about this? The transgender and gender nonconforming community are significantly marginalized in healthcare, and they're one of the most marginalized communities in healthcare. And so we as OTs need to be advocating and working with these clinicians and the individuals that they work with to maximize their care. Oh, I don't know why these are all plugging in. And it's important to understand what they need from us as a community. This was a study done. I don't have the dates on there. I do have it's from lambdalegal.org. There were a couple big studies. One was in 2008, 2009, and then there was a follow-up study in 2015. And I'm guessing this one was the more recent one. But the transgender community, lots of respondents answered, what are the issues that you run into with healthcare? Unaware of health providers are unaware of our health needs was a huge one. Unfortunately, treated me differently. 50% experienced that. And then the yellow is the LGBT community. Provided worse care, which was just amazing. That was nearly a third of the providers. The community felt that they had gotten worse care from them. Refused care, had harsh language, blame, excessive precautions, and physically rough. So there's lots of words, and we're going to go through the words because I think that's one of the biggest things. That's kind of the language that we use and what does it all mean. Binary is the ends of the spectrum language, males and females in the world, and that's kind of the thought process. The binary thought is that there are males and females, and there's not a lot of other thoughts. Non-binary means that there's an understanding there's a spectrum to gender. Biological sex is what we are born with, and it's based on our organs. Sex organs are hormones and our chromosomes. Everyone has a sex of some sort based on these criteria, and it is assigned at birth. But it is a spectrum, and that's one of the things that I really ran across a lot, is realizing there is a spectrum. There's two ends of the spectrum, but then there's a lot of in between, and most of us fit on the in between to some degree. I was a tomboy. I don't wear dresses. I own one or two. But so I don't see myself as super feminine, whereas my daughter was born looking for purses and shoes from a very, very early age. Hoarding them is much more on the feminine spectrum than I am. So I do think there's definitely a spectrum to our gender. Gender is the social construct system that puts you as male or masculine or feminine, and it tends to be based in social expectations. Gender identity is that gender that a person experiences or believes they feel they are, and the mix of that. Gender expression is how a person presents their gender. Again, I don't wear dresses. I tend to wear pants and shirts, but I don't tend to wear, well, I was wearing buffalo check today. So yeah, it just kind of depends. Sexual orientation is different than gender, completely. And I think that's where a lot of people get confused. It's more about your attraction to other individuals than it is about your own gender experience. So that's something to try to keep separate in our thought processes. Transgender are individuals whose gender identity does not match their biological sex. They're assigned gender at birth. Gender dysphoria is the clinically significant distress caused by dealing with your assigned gender and your gender identity, and when those don't coincide. Gender nonconforming are those individuals whose external manifestations of their gender identity does not conform to society's expectations of their gender roles. So those are the ones that, these are the individuals. Tomboys are the more, what we tend to label females with. It's interesting, females' labels tend to be more kind than the male label. You get things like sissy and fairies and those kinds of words, which are much more insulting than tomboy, which, and they talk about, I'm doing an online course that talks about guys transitioning from male to female have a much harder time because it's much more negative. It's much easier for a girl to be masculine than a guy to be feminine. Cisgender is those of us that whose gender identity matches our biological or our assigned gender. Transition is the time that the person begins to live the gender in which they identify rather than the gender they were assigned at birth. And it may or may not include medical and legal aspects. Of course, I took an AOTA, and I hadn't thought about this, but some people who are transgender really don't even have a desire to go through the medical process of transitioning. And that can make things more complicated, but they just don't have that drive. Transmasculine are individuals assigned the sex of female at birth, but whose gender identity is along the more masculine end of the spectrum. And transfeminine is the opposite, people who were assigned as male at birth, but whose gender identity is more along the female end of the spectrum. Genderqueer is an umbrella term. It really implies unspecified gender identity, not sure, just kind of, or not that they're not sure, but there isn't a label for their gender identity. Labels, we like labels because it helps us to understand things, but labels can be very boxing for people in any label. And then allies are those heterosexual individuals who support equal civil rights and gender equality and LGBT issues. So the national survey, this is the national survey that I talked about, and a lot of the information that I have coming up on the slides when it refers back to the number of respondents, it's referring to this survey. So what are the barriers to success or to access for healthcare? High levels of mistreatment, being fired due to gender identity issues. 30% of the respondents had a job reported being fired or denied a promotion, or some other kind of job-related discrimination. Harassment, almost half of the people were harassed. 9% were physically attacked. I currently have an individual on my caseload. He's 21 now, and when I first started working with him, he was riding the bus to get to me, and this was his biggest fear, was being attacked on the bus. And he was very hyper vigilant about what people looking at him and those kinds of things. So now he rides his bike. Tomorrow he'll probably ride his bike to see me, and it will probably be in the teens, and he will ride several miles to come see me because he feels more comfortable doing that than riding the bus, which is unfortunate. 10% were sexually assaulted in the past year. 47% were sexually assaulted at some point in their life. Higher unemployment rates, for getting fired, and people, it's harder to be in society a lot of times when you transit, even after transition. With males, with females, if they take hormones, they can end up getting a lot of the male characteristics. Their bone structures and those kinds of things will change. With males, if they've gone through puberty, you can't reverse those characteristics. So it's really hard for males who have transitioned after puberty to look the part and look like they feel externally and match the internal part of them. So that's kind of hard because unfortunately our society then judges that. Poverty rate is 2 times higher. Unemployment rate in Colorado was lower, but living in poverty was higher. Anyway, there are a lot of people who are transgender and gender non-conforming are more likely to be on public insurance, which has its limitations, especially if you're interested in doing surgeries. The young man that I'm working with right now is trying to go through using Medicaid to have surgeries done, and last fall was just pretty much a nightmare for him. Well, it was a nightmare for him. He has high anxieties, and he had to fight through a lot of his own anxieties to even go see a doctor. Went to see a doctor. The doctor was not kind and not sensitive, and just kind of, because he was a plastic surgeon, and even though he does these surgeries, he just, I don't know. Anyway, and the kid that I worked with showed up the morning of his surgery to have his surgery and went through all of this. I mean, it was a lot of anxiety to get to that point for him. We were working through a lot of things through that time, and he finally gets to the surgery, and he's laying there prepped, ready to go, and the doctor comes in and says, we can't do it. And it was because of some acne issues, and because I have acne. I mean, he'd already been working on trying to clear up the acne, and it wasn't bad. It wasn't as bad as it had been, but it wasn't cleared up completely. And so nope, and just that was it. And that was very devastating. It took my kid several took him several months to even just get over that, and we're hopefully moving on to the next step, back to the step, but with a different doctor. Anyway. So 33% of the respondents living in Colorado experienced a problem in the past year due to these issues with the different healthcare issues that are experienced by people who are transgender or gender nonconforming. You'll see there's denial of trans-related surgeries, issues with finding a surgeon that will do the surgeries, hormone therapy, getting that covered by insurance can be difficult. There's just a lot of specifics that are difficult from an insurance standpoint. Another issue was fear and discrimination by providers. It's in Colorado, it's 42% of fear of being discriminated against, which is higher apparently. I didn't put the regular numbers in, I can't remember them, of the general population. So the biggest fear is being unsure of whether or not you're going to be able to find somebody that understands your issues and understands what's going on with you. It's just another graph. I'm going to go ahead and because we're going to run out of time. So there's much more, not surprisingly, there's higher rates of psychological distress and anxiety around people who are transgender and non-gender conforming, or gender non-conforming. Attempted suicide is 9% higher. Higher rates of smoking, drug use, alcohol abuse, HIV infection. The incidences of homelessness are really high, especially among transgender youth. My son was working in Boulder when he was at CU with the homeless youth organization. There were many people who were transgender or LGBT on the LGBT in the community that were homeless. A lot of them getting picked out by their parents, a lot of them just not fitting well in their parents' world or the world that they have been raised in. So. Okay, so one of the things that we can do to limit barriers is to really think about our pronouns and the pronouns that we use. And this was something that came to light to me when I started working with this young man that I'm working with, because he was super sensitive to pronouns that were being used. So a preferred gender pronoun is a pronoun that a person chooses to use for themselves. There are a lot of options. Zena is a preferred pronoun for her, she, her, and hers. So you could say Zena ate food because Zena was hungry. These new words are hard for my brain to do. So the one that is easiest for me, and again, this is just easiest for me initially, and then once I've met the person and know what their preference is, then I go with that. But the easiest for me is the column here to turn the plurals of they into a singular, they and them, versus he or she. When I presented this at work, when the speech therapist said, "You mean I'm supposed to say they is?" Yeah, and that's just hard. I mean, that's a tough change to think about when you had it drilled in your head so many times that doesn't fit from an English standpoint. The biggest thing is, if you're not sure, ask. If you know what I do, because we're kind of lucky in that we usually have a parent that comes in with the child, and I listen for how that parent refers to that child, whether that parent uses a different marker or if it's the opposite gender, whatever the case may be. Although that's not always a telltale sign. Yes?
What do you do with this parent who's not?
That's what I was just about to say. We had one of the therapists that when we had the four of us all had somebody on the during the process of transitioning. She had a child who had decided, like within the last month or so, that he was transitioning, and he was in his teens, and mom was just not there yet and kept using she and her but my coworker kept correcting mom. And so that was interesting. But when you've had 14 years with your child and you're used to calling your child your daughter or her, it's really hard to make that shift. I'm sure. And I think this mother really actually appreciated those reminders because it was hard. I know the child did from what the team did, from what my coworker was saying. So, but just really think about your pronouns because those are kind of the first line of interaction. You're fine.
A lot of the questions with the parents, if the child is younger, say they're 5 and they're female, but they are referring to themselves to as like a boy or he or that's how do you deal with some parents who aren't like ready to accept that maybe that's who that child identifies themselves as? How do you handle a parent in that situation? Because you want to respect the child and then respect that they want to be called he, but the parent might find it disrespectful if they're not ready to agree with that.
We haven't had that particular issue come up because so far everybody that we've worked with, the parent has been on board. My guess is parents are not going to find or look for services for their child if they don't want to be challenged in that way yet.
Okay.
Just thinking about, because I've had several kids that I've worked with, and we've had several in our department who are in the process of transitioning, and parents have been really supportive, and it makes me wonder how many are out there that could use our services that parents aren't bringing them in because they're not comfortable yet. But like with this one child who was 14, the therapist just kind of said, I'm going to call him. And that's what I'm going to do because that's what he needs me to do. And the parent was okay with it. So, but I don't know what I would do. I still think I would respect the child. I know I would respect the child. But I also know that there would be a chance of losing that parent, unfortunately. But that's true with a lot of different areas when parents and kids are not in agreement with what's going on. So, how do I ask somebody what their preferred gender pronoun is? What is your preferred gender pronoun? With the guy that I'm working with, when I put together this presentation, I said, I'm doing this. Do you mind me asking you some things? And you'll later see that I'll tell you not to let them be your teachers, but he was really very open to me asking questions. And I said, do you mind if people say, what is your preferred pronoun? He said, no, I'd rather that than they'll keep messing it up and pretending like they haven't messed it up. If you don't know and if you're not getting those clues, just ask. Or can you remind me which pronouns you like for yourself? I have a kid that I've worked with for many, many years, and his sister is transitioning as of last Christmas. And I kind of expected this to happen. And they came in after Christmas, and I said to him, or to her, still working on it, I said to her, do you have something you want to tell me? Mom had already kind of given me a heads up on this. And this is a sibling, this isn't the kid I'm working with. And she said, well, I've decided I want to be called, and I want you to use the pronoun and her. And I said, okay, I will do that. Because I knew that was happening, I was trying to give this child a chance to advocate for herself, and I had the relationship with the child and the parents to be able to do that. So, what if I make a mistake? It's okay. Acknowledge your mistake. The kid I was working with says, I just hate it when people make a mistake, and then they pretend like they didn't make a mistake, and they just keep fumbling through words. Just say, I'm sorry, and change your pronoun, and don't drag it out. It just kind of draws even more attention to the fact that this is a thing that people have to deal with. And so it's not their job to confront you with saying, you made a mistake, chill out, it's fine, move on. You should own it and move on. Ignore that. That's our our system allows us to mark in it, so because we can't legally put a person's preferred name in the system if they haven't legally changed it yet. But our system lets us mark, and it's in bright yellow at the top of their chart, that their preferred name is, and they just identify as. So that's very helpful. Gender is not dualistic. It's not into the spectrum. It's not that binary piece. It is on a continuum. Gender identity and sexual orientation are not the same. This gender unicorn was kind of a cool thing that I got when I was at AOTA, at least I was shown to it. So people can fall under this gender identity differently than even their gender expression. And the presenters of the session that I went to pulled up some people in society that we know and said, okay, where would they fall gender identity-wise? Mostly, unless they've come out and made that very clear, we don't necessarily always know. But we might know their gender expression, and it might change. We might have people that are in several spots here because sometimes they're very male, sometimes they're very female, they're masculine and feminine. And then the sex assigned at birth isn't a continuum, although there is some other intersex things that can happen with assigned sexuality or sex. Physically attracted, again, nothing to do with this, and emotionally attracted, not necessarily congruent with physically attracted. So they're all on spectrums, and they are all on their own individual spectrum, which I find very important to keep in mind. Okay, so these are the things that we've talked about that we can do. Be aware of your own attitudes and beliefs and biases. This was interesting when I was presenting at my work, because we have a range of people, but I was really very impressed with the people that were in, Michaela was there, you were there for the presentation. Most of the people from my department came, and very open and willing to try to figure out what it is we need to be doing to make the kids that we're working with more comfortable and empower them. Be aware of the psychological struggles. As the mental health part of me works with these kids. The one kid that I'm working with, when he first came in, he would very frequently he would say, "Oh, this, just this gender shit." And so my first thing with him, after a couple of sessions that he was doing this, I said, "Stop! I don't want you to ever do that again. At least in here, don't call it gender shit. I don't care what else you call it, but don't have a negative label to it." And he said, "Well, I don't want to call it a journey." I said, "That's fine." And he had his reasons for that. And so we kind of talked about it for a while, and the word quest had a lot of positive things based on some experiences in his childhood. And so he said, "Okay, I'll call it a gender quest." And I said, "That's great. Call it that." Never heard him say gender shit again, and really saw quite a change in his thought processes. So some of those psychological struggles we can facilitate just in how we help them talk about themselves. Okay, OT role. Holistic care, focusing on the nature of the person, the environment, the occupation. Gender presentation. How do I shop for a different gender? How do I size for a different gender? How do I manage bra straps and things like that I've never had to do? What's my grooming look like? Do I do laundry differently? Those kinds of things. Sexuality and sexual practices are definitely an issue, not necessarily with pediatrics, so I don't have to go there, but that's something that becomes an issue for adults that are working with individuals who are transgender or gender non-conforming. Next door, we have a specialist in pelvic floor dysfunction, and she's working with an individual who is transgender. So there's a lot of, as you can imagine, a lot of challenges to working with an individual who identifies male but has pelvic floor issues and having to figure those pieces out. So work-related occupations, learning gender skills, job skills. That's what was interesting to me when I was reading that one. Maybe changing careers, managing gender at work or at school, educating employers. That could be a role we could take on, how to educate, how to help, how to advocate for or help our clients advocate for themselves. Social, this is one that I do quite a bit. Social networking, how do we get these individuals out in the community, especially the older adolescent kids and young adults. Because they do get very isolated often, and it's, what are your options? When the 21-year-old came in initially, he didn't want his social circle to be others who were transgender or even LGBT at all. He wanted typical people. I think he figured out there isn't really such a thing. So now he's actually seeking people that have had similar experiences. So it's been kind of trying to figure out how do we help him feel comfortable and safe in his environment and accessing social interactions, both with non-transgender and non-conforming people. Double negative there, but and now with people who are transgender and gender non-conforming. Advocating, presenting, letting people have information about what do I do. For my the Northern Colorado UC Health folks, I'm advocating for us to put together a rehab team of individuals that are kind of the go-to people if we have questions or concerns or thoughts, or if we end up with somebody on a caseload who is transgender or gender non-conforming, what can we do to support those individuals? And then with surgeries and illnesses and the medical end of things, there's roles for OT as well. Like I said, with the pelvic floor issues and that kind of thing. So, questions, thoughts, comments, interactions, Jessica?
Do you think this is going to be a new specialty area, especially you said that fluid sexuality would have to think about pediatrics community? So as they get into like adolescence and start having that desire of those urges, if they are transitioning, I feel like this is going to become something that we'll need, especially not essentially specialization, but maybe someone who specifically handles transitioning persons or even those who just are LGBT who need services that are greater than typical.
I think it's not that it's not. I don't think that it's going to be. I think it is. Yeah. I think there is already in a lot of places people that have that specialty. Okay. Just based on when I went to a conference and went to a session, the people that were in the audience and the people that were presenting, that's already their focus. A lot of them, just because of, most of them were individuals who were in the LGBT community, and so they almost by default ended up kind of being those specialists.
Right. I know that you were just saying that the assessments are not quite matching that, so I didn't know. Like, I understand that it's an area for OTs, but the OT field is not really created an area yet, as well as like allowing documentation to reflect that there is a transition or gender change. Or
I think we're in the process of that. Okay. I think that standardized assessments, yeah, definitely we have a lot of room to go there. The BOT is boy-girl normed. The Miller Fund is. The sensory profile is not. So there are some that are not gender normed. The BOT, even though it does have gender norms, it also has a combined norm. So I think there are some efforts to start to go there. It just takes so much work to norm these things that now to go back and renorm them and redo a whole assessment takes time.
I'm curious how they would do that with physical assessment, physiological standpoints. With male having certain characteristics for female, and obviously when we change the birth developer makeup, how they would even go about norming that.
Well, and I think what they will probably do is end up taking away the gender parts of it, okay, and just coming up with a norm, because that's what I kind of did when I was going through that and scoring the kiddo that I scored. Is I actually went with all three. I did the bot on that kiddo, and I went with the female score, the male score, and then the combined score. I did that because he identified male. Males typically are behind in fine motor skills. Just whatever. They're typically behind girls at kindergarten age. And in order for us to continue to see this child, I wanted to know which scores were going to be the most efficient for insurance purposes. So that's kind of why I scored all three. And then I reported the one that was the most helpful for us to be able to continue to see this child, but gave mom all of them so that she would have all that information. And she wanted as much information as she could. So, but I do think I think that's why we don't necessarily have standardized assessments as being the only way that we can figure out what's going on with families. So, yeah, Ryan?
For young children that claim that they are transitioning, do they have to seek like counseling services before they could like receive medication, or before parents can give?
Yes, you have to have a letter from your counselor before you can receive any of the like hormone therapy pieces. And it may even be a letter from 2 different individuals. I can't remember. I know I wrote a letter for the 21-year-old he was already actually on hormones. I wrote a letter for him to be able to do the surgery. So I think for the hormones, he only had to have 1. And you do have to have a psychological evaluation and decide whether or not you're on the spectrum, the psychological diagnosis of, I forget what it is. Like, this is really a psychological thing, but anyway, it is. So
is that just kind of like, I want to say, it almost seems like that saying that it's a psychological problem, and it's an insult.
Yes.
Almost, or not an insult, but degrading the
Correct.
fact that they are making a decision about their own bodies and lives.
Yeah.
To say that you have something, like, I don't understand why, is this just something that's still, is this changing?
it is changing.
Okay.
In the DSM-5, I actually have that, probably have that slide with information with me. I can't remember, I was trying to remember this last night because I thought, oh, I definitely want to say this, but it used to be called, it was a really harsh label prior to the GH.
It was, I mean, it wasn't too long ago that like being gay, lesbian, or bisexual was not a mental illness.
It was, it was not,
it was clumped with that.
Yeah.
It was like all LGBT.
Right, it was, and it they're really insulting. I even forgot it because it was just so. It was a very insulting terminology. It was like, anyway, and they've lessened that, and I think they've even I wouldn't swear that they've taken the LGBT diagnosis out. Transgender is still a diagnosis, but it's much more. Much less harsh, but it's still in the DSM-5. It's still in the mental health diagnosis, and it's like, and that was one of the points in the online course that I was in, was it's not a mental health issue. Individuals who are transgender and gender nonconforming and LGBT, not all, often have issues because society, us, and the world make that happen. But yeah, so
how do we as OTs enforce that? Like, what do we call it to allow other people to understand that it's not a psychological problem, that it's who they are, and we as society have not accepted that?
So for like the kids that we are working with, even if I get, and I don't think any of them that I've gotten have come with a referral that was this DSM-5 diagnosis, but I don't use that diagnosis. I use if it's anxiety I'm treating this kid for, that's what I'm using as the diagnosis. If it's fine motor stuff or whatever. So I get as far away from that being a diagnosis as I can. And because that's not why I'm treating this individual. And then the advocacy, the educating others piece of things.
just thinking more for parents and when they're trying to struggle through it's like, well, this is what the psychologist said, which I'm sure they need before that they probably pursue other kind of services. Like how do we trying to figure out how I'm going to explain to a parent who doesn't see this as anything more than a psychological problem that it's not a psychological problem beyond just saying this is not something that's affecting the brain or this is not.
I think you just keep, because you keep reiterating that to parents. Again, I've not run into that issue. I think, and maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm naive. I think that generations that are having children right now tend to be more willing and open to hear. And I'm also not still in the South, so I suspect it might be different if I was still living in Alabama, but I don't know. So maybe I'm protected a little bit living in Colorado, but I do think that it is getting easier and people are doing better about being able to be accepting. And but I think you just keep saying this is not a psychological issue, and we're not addressing their gender identity or their sexuality. We're addressing the anxiety or the bimotor skills or whatever it is that we would still be addressing. Other thoughts, questions?
Do you ever go to pronoun that you just started feeling young, self-discovery, or parents that are trying to keep their kids gender? Do you just
they and them? I am really trying hard, and I'm not there yet. I try to use they and them until I hear anybody use a pronoun, even with somebody that I'm not trying to guess what's going on, just because I want to change my thought processes. My son and I had this discussion. I'm trying to remember what it was. He got a certificate, and he was a psychology major at CU, and he got a certificate in LGBT studies. But so he was kind of my go-to when I had questions, as opposed to having to ask my clients. But we got into a discussion about, I had said something about she in the driving, somebody pulled, and I said something about she, and then I went, wait a minute, no, they, because I didn't even know whether this person was male or female or whatever. And then we got into this discussion about trying to change our language and how hard that is to do that. But yeah, so I try to do that as much as I can until I know one way or the other, or keep going if I don't. So. Thoughts, concerns, questions, comments?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I am always available for more questions if people have questions. Not that I have answers, but I might have at least directions to send people. So.
Do we have this PowerPoint slide?
Yeah, yeah, I will make it available.
Thank you.
What is the online class that you were taking that you were taking?
It's Pezzy, who does a lot of online stuff, or does a lot of continuing ed stuff. It's LGBTQ youth clinical strategies and support. Clinical strategies to support sexual orientation and gender identity. And I just started it last week, but it was the morning that I had my colonoscopy, and I ended up falling asleep halfway through it. So. Yeah.
Those of you watching online, the password is spring break. Enjoy your spring breaks. We'll see you after.